And finally, we come to the conclusion of the core component of the SICHAH, whereby the Rebbe takes his reading of Rashi's commentary to the double Mishkan and applies the underlying principles to formulate a hashkafa for the present. 3 points were read into Rashi regarding the Beit HaMikdash number 1. The first was the collateral aspect, and collateral by its very nature mandates that at some point in time in the future the object needs to be returned. The second point was that the retention of the collateral by God in the form of the Churban is linked to the actions of the nation, Al Avonotehem Shel Yisrael, implying that it is in the hands of the nation as to whether that collateral will or will not be returned to them. And the third point was an extension to point 1 and 2, that Churban is not the default option from the standpoint of HaKadosh Baruch Hu. For if this was the case, God should have activated his rights to retain the collateral, in other words, destruction of the Beit HaMikdash, as soon as the nation collectively violated the covenantal agreement of Brit Matan Torah. The reality was that despite the constant acceptance of pagan worship by the nation, God allowed the Beit HaMikdash to remain for over 400 years, hoping that the nation would willingly reject Avodah Zarah without the need to resort to punitive measures, which were ultimately directed against the nation in the year 3338 with the destruction of the Beit HaMikdash. And even that, midrashically, was an act of chesed. God projected his anger with the destruction of a building rather than destruction of a nation. The collateral was returned with the return of the Mikdash singular. However, once again the cycle repeated itself. There was a communal rejection, both direct and indirect, of the covenantal agreement, resulting in the destruction of Beit HaMikdash number 2. This situation has remained with us for the past 1900 years. As with Beit HaMikdash number 1, they needed to await the rebuilding of Beit HaMikdash number 2 for the return of the Shekhinah, signifying the new beginning. So too, in the period following Churban Beit HaMikdash number 2, which underpins a fundamental core belief of Judaism, Bebiat HaMashiach, and by extension, presumably, the return of the Shekhinah to the nation with the building of Beit HaMikdash number 3. And, as with the destruction of Beit HaMikdash number 1 and its eventual replacement with Beit HaMikdash number 2, so too with Churban Beit HaMikdash number 2, we can extrapolate and apply the situation into the Messianic era, that firstly was not a destruction of the concept of the Beit HaMikdash, but rather it was taken as collateral. Point number 2, that to a certain extent the Messianic era is linked to the nation, and that furthermore, although it has been 1900 years, the lack of Beit HaMikdash number 3 is not the default option from the standpoint of HaKadosh Baruch Hu.